The first thing he noticed was her shadow. Not the knock. Not the voice. Just the outline of a girl standing too close to the glass. Too still. He closed his book, heartbeat quickening. 3 sharp knocks followed. He hadn't had a visitor in months. Not since the last time someone recognized him. He stood slowly, careful not to make a sound as he approached the door. Peeked through the curtain and froze. She looked familiar, young, maybe 20, ponytail, worn hoodie, nervous hands clutching something, a pie dish, and then it clicked. The girl from across the street, the sick woman's daughter. He opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice low. She smiled. Shy. "Hi. Sorry. I'm Emma. I live across the street. Well, with my mom. You helped her last week? With the groceries?" She told me. He nodded once. "Right. I just wanted to say thank you. She's been sick, and no one else really notices her." He didn't move. She held up the pie dish. "It's homemade, well, boxed mix. But I tried." He stared at it, then at her. She had kind eyes. That was the problem. "I don't eat sweets," he said. "Oh," she faltered. Sorry. That's okay. I just thought." He sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in." She sat on the edge of his old couch like she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch it. He poured tea instead of coffee. He didn't trust caffeine around nerves, especially not his. They sat in silence. "You don't talk much," she said finally. "No need to." She smiled. "You remind me of my uncle. He was a Marine. Said words are wasted on people who aren't listening." He raised an eyebrow. "Was he right?" "Sometimes." Another silence. She looked around. "You live alone?" "Yes." "No kids?" He shook his head. "Wife?" He looked at her then. "No." Emma flushed. "Sorry. That was Ozzy." He took a slow sip of tea. "Curiosity isn't a sin." She nodded, eyes falling to her hands. He noticed the chipped nail polish, the faint tremor, the way she hadn't made eye contact for more than a second. "You okay?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. "Yeah. My mom's getting worse, and the house is so quiet. It's weird how quiet can be louder than anything." He understood that. Too well. "Sometimes silence is the safest sound," he said. Emma tilted her head. "But it doesn't feel safe." They talked for an hour. She told him about school, about dropping out, about working nights at the gas station and reading novels during slow shifts. He listened, didn't offer advice, just sat there. When she stood to leave, he said, "Thanks for the pie." Her smile was soft. "You didn't try it." He hesitated. "Next time." "Next time?" she asked, hope creeping into her voice. He said nothing, but he didn't close the door until she was gone. That night, he pulled the old shoebox from the back of the closet, sat at the table, opened it. Inside, a folded newspaper clipping. Yellowed, fragile. Local teacher convicted. Sexual misconduct with minor his. Photo, younger, cleaner, but still him. He unfolded the article. Read the same paragraph he'd memorized a decade ago. She was 16. He was 36. They said it was grooming, said it was exploitation, and maybe they were right. He served 3 years, moved here after. New name, new job, new rules, no friendships, no children, no chance. And now, Emma, kind, curious, close. He ran a hand through his hair, chest tight. He needed to shut it down, quickly, clearly, before kindness became comfort, before comfort became risk, before risk became a headline again. But, as he stared at the pie on the counter, untouched, he whispered, "Too late." He told himself it was the last time. When she left, when the door clicked shut, he stood still for a full 5 minutes, listening to the echo of her footsteps fade into the street. Then he locked the door, drew every curtain, sat at the kitchen table with the pie still untouched, and whispered, "This doesn't happen again." But it did. 3 days later, she knocked again. This time, he didn't wait. He opened the door before she finished her second knock. Her hand was raised, surprised midair. She smiled. "Thought I'd drop off that book we talked about." He stared at the paperback in her hand. Worn spine, yellow post-its sticking out like feathers. He stepped back without a word. She took it as permission. They talked about fiction, about the difference between love and longing, about bad endings that still feel honest. She quoted a line, "Sometimes you don't realize how lonely you are until someone sees you." He looked away. She didn't push. The visits continued, once a week, then twice, always during the day. Always. With something in hand. A book, a poem, a cup of coffee she insisted was on the house. He kept count. 6 visits, 8 hours of conversation, 0 touches, 0 mistakes. But she stayed longer each time, and he started waiting. He told himself it was routine, then caught himself looking at the clock, checking the window, smiling when she arrived. That scared him more than anything. One evening, she fell asleep on his couch. It was unintentional. She'd had a long shift. Her mother had kept her up coughing. The warmth of his living room, the sound of rain, his voice reading aloud, it all lulled her under. He stared at her for 20 minutes before moving, covered her gently with a throw blanket. Sat back in his chair, arms crossed, like a guard. He didn't sleep, just watched, and listened, and hated himself a little more with every hour that passed. In the morning, she woke slowly, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he said quickly. Too quickly. She rubbed her eyes. "You stayed awake?" He nodded, her gaze softened. "You didn't have to." He stood. "Yes, I did." That afternoon, he went to the old file cabinet in the garage, pulled out the envelope, labeled registration. Inside, documents from another life, conditions, restrictions, a list of things he wasn't allowed to do. One sentence stared back at him. "You must not engage in any relationship, romantic or otherwise, with persons under the age of 18, she was 20. Maybe 21 now. Legal, but legality was never the problem. Perception was. Intent. History. He shoved the envelope back in the drawer, closed it with a bang. When she came by next, she brought soup. "My mom's been in and out of the hospital," she said. "She says thank you, by the way. She doesn't really say that to people, especially not men." He took the soup, nodded. "She okay?" Emma shrugged. "As okay as she gets. I think she's tired of fighting." He looked at her then, really looked, at the weight she carried, the quiet under her voice. "You're stronger than you think," he said. She laughed bitterly. "No, I'm just really good at faking it." He didn't respond, but the next morning he left a book on her porch, inside the cover. "You don't have to fake it here." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. That night, she texted him, a single message. "Thank you for seeing me." He stared at it for 10 minutes, then turned off his phone and didn't sleep at all. He started leaving the door unlocked when she was due to visit, not because he forgot, because he hoped. It was reckless. He knew that. Every rule he'd written for himself after prison began to bend the moment Emma stepped into his life. He justified it with silence, with phrases like, "She's an adult now," and "I haven't done anything." But hope is a slippery thing, and he was already holding too tight. She came one rainy afternoon carrying a book of poems and 2 steaming coffees. "Truce," she said, offering one. "You said you don't like sweets. I didn't say anything about caffeine." He hesitated, then took the cup. She sat cross-legged on the couch like she belonged there. "Read me something," she said. He blinked. "You want me to just on something you like?" He opened the collection. His voice shook on the first line, but she didn't laugh. She just closed her eyes and listened. By the second stanza, he wasn't reading for her anymore. He was reading because he wanted her to stay. Later, they sat in quiet again. Familiar. Safe. Then she spoke. "You know, I used to think no one saw. Me? Not really. I was the girl with the sick mom, the dropout, the quiet one. But when I'm here, I feel like I exist again." He swallowed hard. "I see you, Emma." She looked up, startled by the tenderness in his voice. And then she smiled. "I know." She started staying longer, sometimes until dark. Once, she helped him fix a broken hinge in the kitchen. Another time, she brought old photos of her mom from before the illness and laughed over them until her eyes glistened. And one evening, when the power flickered off during a storm, she didn't run home. She lit candles, and they played cards on the floor like old friends. At one point, she leaned back on her elbows, looked at him and said, "You never ask me about guys." He froze. "Should I?" "No. I just think you already know I don't bring anyone here." Silence. "I don't bring people into my life who don't make me feel safe," she added. He met her eyes. "That's a dangerous thing to say to someone like me." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" He stood abruptly. "I need to check the fuse box." That night, after she left, he couldn't stop pacing. He felt it. The shift. It wasn't just kindness anymore. She was beginning to reach for him the way he had tried not to reach back. And for one moment, one impossible second, he let himself wonder. Maybe this time is different. Maybe he wasn't that man anymore. Maybe redemption wasn't just distance and solitude. Maybe he was allowed to feel. He picked up her empty coffee cup from the table, held it like it was holy, then threw it into the trash like it burned. A week later, a woman from the neighborhood knocked on his door, Mrs. Klein, wrinkled, nosy, always carrying judgment like a handbag. "I've seen her coming here," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. He didn't ask who she meant. "You need to be careful," she warned. "People remember. Some never forget." He didn't answer, just closed the door gently. Inside, he stood in the hallway for a long time, then walked straight to the drawer, pulled out the old newspaper again, looked at his own eyes. Hollow, empty. The man in the article wasn't the one. Emma knew, but maybe he was still somewhere inside, waiting. And Emma, she didn't know. Not yet. He pressed the clipping flat on the table, hands shaking. She deserves to know. But another part of him whispered, "If she finds out, you lose everything." And he didn't know which truth hurt more. She wasn't snooping. At least, that's what she told herself. The drawer had been opened just a crack. The old file folder halfway out. She thought maybe it was something he wanted her to see. Something he was too scared to hand her directly. So she looked. She shouldn't have. But she did. And the headline hit her like a punch to the ribs. Local. Teacher convicted. Sexual misconduct with minor his photo. Younger, but undeniably him. Her hands went cold. Her mouth dry. She sat down on the floor, the folder in her lap like a wound she'd opened with bare hands. She read every word, every line, twice. Then she left. Quiet. Fast. Without closing the drawer. He found it open that evening. And knew. She knew The pie dish she'd brought last time was gone from the counter. He sat at the table in the dark, not moving, not blinking, until the sun was gone and the house turned into a shadow. He didn't try to call her, didn't send a message. There was nothing to say. The next day, someone knocked. Not her. It was her brother. He was taller, angrier. Voice raised before the door was even fully open. "If you ever come near her again, I'll break your jaw." John didn't answer. "She trusted you. My mom trusted you." Still, he said nothing. The younger man pushed forward, chest puffed. "Did you think you could start over with a new girl? That we wouldn't find out what you are?" John only said, "One thing. I never touched her. Like you didn't touch the last one?" His jaw tightened. The punch didn't come. Just the rage, hanging heavy in the air between them. "She cries, you know, all night. She won't eat, won't talk." John's stomach twisted. Then the brother spat on the porch and walked away. The silence after was different. Not the kind he'd grown used to. This was shame. Guttural. Total. He packed a bag that night, thought of leaving town. Again. Like he had after court, after prison, after every new face learned the truth. But something in him said, not yet. She deserved more than an empty space. She deserved the truth, from him, not from paper. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 4th night, she came back, no knocking, no pie, just a shadow in the doorway. Rain-soaked hoodie, eyes red, arms crossed. He opened the door and stepped back. She didn't move. "Is it true?" she asked. He didn't lie. "Yes." "Everything?" "No." "Then tell me what's true." Stepped aside. She entered. The house was cold. She didn't sit. He didn't offer. He stood, hands clasped tightly in front of him, and told her everything. How she was 16. How he was her teacher. How he thought he was in love. How he blurred every line. Crossed one. Just one. But enough. How he pled guilty. How he served his time. How no one ever looked at him the same way again. How he'd stopped expecting them to. When he finished, he said nothing else, waited. Emma stared at him, breathing heavy, like every part of her body was deciding whether to run or scream. Then she whispered, "Do you regret it?" He looked her in the eyes. "Every day," she swallowed. "Because you got caught?" "No," he said. "Because back then I didn't see anyone but myself, and now I see, and it terrifies me." She didn't respond, not with words. She turned, walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't look back, and for the first time in years, he cried without hiding his face. She didn't come back for 7 days. Not one text, not one call. Just silence thick enough to drown in. He told himself that was the end. That it was better this way. Safer. More honest. But part of him still left the porch light on, just in case. And on the 8th day, she returned. He was sitting on the steps when she approached. Hoodie up, hands jammed in her pockets. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes were wary but steady. "I'm not here for pie," she said. "I wouldn't offer any," he said softly. Silence stretched between them. Then she sat beside him. On the top step, close, not touching. She stared straight ahead at the quiet street. "You hurt someone," she said. "Yes. You lied to people." "Yes. You made yourself invisible so you wouldn't be held accountable again." He hesitated. Then, "Yes." Emma nodded slowly. "And I think I understand why." He turned toward her, startled. She didn't flinch. "You were ashamed. Still are." He looked down. "I should be. But you never touched me." "No. You never even tried." "I couldn't." Would you have? The question landed like a blade. He didn't answer quickly, but when he did, it was honest. I wanted to. Yes, but I wouldn't have. Why? Because this time, I saw you. Not what I wanted. Not what I was missing. You. And that's why. I ran. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. That's what scared me most, she said. You didn't feel dangerous. You felt real. Safe. And I didn't want to believe that someone with your past could be either. He nodded slowly. That's what scares me too. They sat like that, in the soft dark, with the hum of porch, lights and distant cars. Then she said, I can't unknow what you did. I wouldn't ask you to. I can't pretend it didn't change how I see you. I know. But I also can't pretend it erased everything else. What you said, what you listened to, what you didn't try to take from me. He turned his head. Their eyes met. I know what you were, she whispered. But I see who you are. He swallowed hard. And who is that? She stood. Someone who broke something and then built a life out of silence because he was afraid he couldn't be trusted again. She hesitated. But I trust you. He stared up at her, unsure how to breathe. I'm not asking for anything, she added. Not a second chance. Not forgiveness. I just didn't want you to disappear again. Not when I finally started to believe you weren't the monster. In the paper, he stood slowly, kept his distance. You shouldn't have to carry this. I'm not carrying you, she said. I'm choosing to keep walking near you. She offered a faint smile. Good night, John. And for the first time in years, his own name didn't sound like a warning, just a beginning. Spring came quietly. Emma still visited. Not every day, not even every week. But when she did, she brought books, left tea on the porch, sat beside him in silence. They didn't talk about the article anymore. They didn't talk about the past, but it lived between them, acknowledged, not denied. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the street turned gold, she sat beside him on the porch and said, You don't owe me your story, just your truth. He nodded, and that was enough. Not redemption, not romance, but something gentler. Understanding. Presence. She saw him, and she stayed. Not because he deserved it, but because he'd stopped pretending he did, and for the first time in his life that felt like a kind of grace.